Hello, and welcome back to my channel. I'm wearing my medieval costume again today because why not? And I'll be doing a video form of the blog post which I just published today. It's called All About Contrapasso Part 1. Inferno. It explains the system of punishment and penance in the Divine Comedy. The post grew to be a lot longer than I anticipated, about 1,200 words, so I decided to save the Contrapasso and Purgatorio for a separate Part 2 post. So, and this will not be obviously an exhaustive review and summary and such of the entire poem or even giving many particular details. It's just in the particular about the system of punishment and explaining it. So let's just get on with it. As I've mentioned many times, there were many important details, nuances, and themes about the Divine Comedy which completely sailed over my head the first time around at age 24 because of the speed at which I read, the trying task of mentally translating the anachronistic, annoying Elizabethan English of the Lawrence Binyon translation into modern English, and the fact that my cognitive development wasn't quite complete. One of those things I didn't notice at all was contrapasso. Contrapasso, which means suffer the opposite in Latin, formed from the roots contra and patior, is a punishment contrasting with or reminding souls in hell and purgatory of their sins. As great of an imagination as he had, Dante didn't create all these tortures and penances willy-nilly. They all directly relate to the sins committed. Everything else is just literary enhancement. The very first Contrapasso is an Ante Inferno, outside the gates of hell. Here are punished the souls of people who took no sides in life, either for good or evil. They just passively drifted whichever way the wind took them, only caring about their own self-interests. Thus, they're condemned to forever run after a banner to nowhere, and they're continually stung by horseflies and wasps. Hell proper begins in the second circle, for the lustful. These souls are constantly blown about by a whirlwind, symbolic of how they let themselves be carried away by their passions. Of everyone in hell, their punishment is by far the lightest. Gluttons are in the third circle, stuck in freezing muck and mire, kept fresh by endless icy, foul rain, hail, and snow. They wallow in this disgusting slop, which is indirectly compared to feces. In life, they couldn't gorge themselves enough on food and drink. Now they have to feast on the exact opposite of fine cuisine for eternity. The fourth circle is for misers, hoarders, spendthrifts, and the greedy. They have huge weights strapped to their chests and constantly crash into one another. The wasting and hoarding are opposites. They're punished together because these sins are mirrors of one another. Hence the regular collisions from which these souls never learn, and we will also see later on in Purgatory or other pairings of sins which seem on their face to be like complete direct opposites. In the fifth circle are the wrathful. Actively wrathful souls fight in the slimy river Styx, while passively wrathful souls are beneath the water. Some scholars translate the word slothful, accidiosi in Italian, as sullen, and thus believe the unifying category of the fifth circle is tristizia, grief, sorrow, since its effects can include envy, pride, wrath, and sloth. And some scholars or just lay people reading it believe this refers to depression too, and that Dante was saying if you're depressed or have melancholy, you're going to hell. And I really don't share that opinion at all. I don't believe that was his opinion either, particularly because he himself did suffer from depression in his life, and some people also believe he was, God forbid, suicidal, like early on in his exile, and that was what inspired his writing of the poem, because he was in the darkest night of his soul and he wanted to cheer himself up and help to pull himself out of his dark forest through writing this poem where he is saved and is put back on the right path with his faith and his life. Oh, and by the way, on a personal level, wrath, even though I'm not a Christian myself, wrath is, of the 7 deadly sins, the one I probably would struggle with the most. I, have a hard time controlling my anger and my frustration and annoyance. Sometimes I'm, not constantly having, temper tantrums or screaming at people, but it's just, something I guess I would be passively wrathful. It's just, hard for me to control my anger sometimes, and unfortunately, particularly when I was younger, I would let it get the better of me, but I am trying to work on that throughout my life. The sixth circle punishes heretics in flaming tombs, which some scholars believe was based on the Latin Vulgate translation of a line in Psalm 49, which appears as Psalm 48 in this translation of the Bible, which was done by St. Jerome. Their sepulchres shall be their houses forever. In the original Hebrew, however, It's clear that this isn't talking specifically about religious heresy, but people who boast of their wealth, glory, and houses lasting forever and think they'll never see the grave. And I'll be reading from the particular lines in this. I mentioned this in a video I did fairly early on in September, like a brief walkthrough of the Jewish religious books that are currently in my possession. Most of them are unfortunately in storage 900 miles away, and I really should redo that video because it wasn't particularly good. I didn't have a very good script, but like here it is. And anyway, I did get this book. It was like a present for the counselors. My first summer I had worked for an Orthodox day camp, and it was very nice to get this as a present, my own Tehillim psalm book. There are those who trust in their wealth, who boast of their vain riches, that no man can redeem his brother from death, nor ransom his own life from God. The redemption of his soul is beyond reach. It can never be done. Why does he think that he will live forever, and not see the grave? For he sees that wise men die. Together the fool and the brute perish, and leave their wealth to others. Yet they imagine their houses will stand forever, as their monuments for generations, and that cities will be named after them. But man's glory will die with him. Like a simple beast, he is unaware. This is their way, their folly, and of their sons who follow them with approval. Like sheep they are laid in the grave, with death as their shepherd. Honest men will rule over them when morning comes, while their bodies crumble in the grave, their home. So that's just, I guess a difference of translation and like religious difference a little bit as well, but that was just something I found interesting to note. The first ring of the seventh circle punishes violence against others, because anger and greed were traditionally seen as the primary motives for violence. Here we find metaphors for cooking and horses, in the form of fire, heat, and spurs. Punishments in the first ring are a boiling river of blood and centaurs shooting arrows, and I guess the horse and spurs metaphors would have been much more like prominent and obvious to people back in the Middle Ages and Renaissance when, horses were associated with like warfare and people just, kicking their horses up to chase after people. Unfortunately, we just don't really use horses that much anymore, except unless if you like live on a farm and are out in the countryside or do like an equestrian hobby. But, I've fallen off of a galloping horse, so I know, the horse wasn't, acting violent or anything. It was just, unfortunately, a bit of an accident. But, these things can happen with horses, and you're more aware of this if you've actually, been around horses in a significant fashion. It's like probably more like detached and like unfamiliar to most modern readers. The second ring punishes violence against oneself, that is, suicide. This is the only place in hell with vegetation, a forest haunted by harpies, half human, half bird creatures, who eat the leaves of oak trees, in which suicides are entombed. These souls can only speak and mourn when their trees are damaged or broken, because they destroy the unity of body and soul. The soul's complex powers are reduced and dispersed in this very painful, distorted way. And I do have a video I did about the William Blake watercolor, The Wood of the Self-Murderers, which also talks a little bit about Canto 13 of Inferno, from which this painting is based. You can check that out in my playlist, which is called All About Dante and the Divine Comedy. The third ring punishes violence against God, nature, and art, with flaming rain upon a burning, sterile plain. This parallels the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Blasphemers, usurers, and gay men are found here. And, the sterile plain is kind of a metaphor, at least in the like medieval and pretty much most like pre-20th century understanding of like gay men as being sterile, because they couldn't like comprehend that like a gay man could possibly have a child through like, sperm donation with just, a woman who is willing to enter into a co-parenting arrangement like that, or adoption. And I'm 100% against commercial surrogacy, by the way. But anyway, that's kind of getting off topic, but that is, something, a metaphor to consider, which Dante would have had in mind, and that's a whole subject for a different like video. I do also have a video called Gay Men in the Divine Comedy. If you want to check that out, you can. And also, I'm obligated to point out that the traditional Jewish view is that Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed because of lack of hospitality, not sexual behavior, though I know obviously the traditional Christian teaching and understanding of this story is much, much different. That's just, one of many things our two faiths have that, are not similar at all, though we do have obviously commonalities as well. Malabolgia, evil ditches, the eighth circle, contains 10 circular trenches for various types of fraud. It's compared to an inverted, perverted castle. The cliff surrounding it is a castle keep, which is a fortified tower of refuge within a castle, and the central pit is the world outside the castle. Its ambiguous futility is emphasized by the pit gathering in and truncating the ridges. The first bolgia punishes seducers, pimps, and panderers with whipping, perhaps a reminder of how their associates urge them on to keep sinning. In the second bolgia are flatterers immersed in feces, a substitution of lower for upper products of the body. Well, obviously, you using your mouth when you do flattery, and like obviously feces is the exact lower end. Simony, selling church positions and indulgences, is punished in the third bolgia by head down burial, so their like feet and legs are sticking up out of the ground, and like the top half of their body is submerged in it. Many of these people were clergy, even popes. They inverted church values in life and now invert baptismal iconography in death. And the traditional picture of baptism was someone like from the waist up in a river or a font. And this is also one of the funny moments when Pope Nicholas III mistakes Dante for Pope Boniface VIII, and he expresses surprise he's there early. By many years, the book lied to me. Sorcerers and fortune-tellers are in the fourth bolgia. Because their faces are twisted around, they're forced to walk backwards. They tried to see into the future without a divine gift of prophecy, and now can only see in reverse. And this is one of the more like obvious, straightforward contrapassos. It's pretty obvious to understand like what it's punishing and why. Just from reading the plain text, you don't really need to do much like outside like study or like reading footnotes to get what Dante is like doing with these people. Barators, who in other words corrupt politicians, are in the fifth bolgia, thrown into a river of boiling pitch by devils. If the sinners emerge, they're poked with pitchforks. The devils taunt them by saying if they must grab something, grab the pitch, which refers to the secret grabbing they did in life, like for offices and like power and such like that. There's also a parallel between the ship of state and the pitch used to seal Noah's ark, which was seen as a symbol of the church, which signified the bond of love holding it together. And it's interesting, baratry was one of the false charges Dante was like accused of and found guilty of in absentia, and he was like, if he was found in Florentine territory again, he would be burnt at the stake. And when he later like refused an offer of amnesty in 1315, it changed from burning to he would be, God forbid, beheaded if anyone caught him in their territory. So that must have been, weighing heavily on his mind that he was like falsely accused of this, while like other people who committed the same sins, like for real, not just, false accusations, were like totally getting away with it and like allowed to get, more power and money and influence and such. Hypocrites are in the sixth bolgia, wearing heavy leaden robes, though the word hypocrite comes from Greek hypokrites, which officially means to judge, and was used in the context of theater to mean interpreter, actor, one who gives an answer, simulator. Dante followed a notoriously fanciful 13th century etymology book by Uguccione of Pisa, Magnae Derivationes. This book claimed the word either derived from the roots hyper, above, and chrysos, gold, in other words, gilt over, or hypo, below, and chrysos, having something else beneath gold. And it was interesting to note when I was looking through the notes in the Derling Martinez translation of Inferno for like help writing this blog post, they have a misprint for the word Greek word for gold, which is chrysos, Chrysos. They spelled it as like the English word crisis, which we pronounce crisis, but obviously that's not correct because like Greek didn't have a letter C. They would represent that sound with a K or maybe like with a CH, depending on what the letter or the word was, but that obviously was like a complete typo. I did have noticed a few like little minor typos throughout both their translation of Inferno and Purgatoria, just like extra spaces between words, or like no spaces between a few words, and just a couple of misspellings here and there. It's just something I noticed, and I do like credit my like constant notice of like little details, like little errors when I'm critiquing others' work, because I'm a little bit over half German. Germans are notoriously paying attention to detail. Thieves are in the seventh bolgia, tormented by snakes. Besides having obvious symbolism with the Bible, Satan is also seen as the archetypal thief. Counselors of fraud are in the eighth bolgia, hidden in flames, representing the fire of intellect, the malice that motivated their counsels, and the power of their rhetoric. And this is Canto 26 of Inferno famously has Ulysses Odysseus in one of these flames. That's one of the more well-known parts of Inferno, but obviously I'm not going into detail about any of the things in this part of the poem. That will be like a subject for a different video. Sowers of discord, in other words, schismatics, are in the ninth bolgia, their bodies gruesomely mutilated to symbolize how they rent the church asunder. Fortunately, Due to a widespread medieval misunderstanding of history, Prophet Muhammad was believed to have originally been an Nestorian Christian and is therefore depicted here. And there are also several other people who sowed like other kinds of discord, like between family members. For example, the poet Bertrand de Born, who is like his head is cut off from his body, and he like just lifts it up, and that's also depicted in the 1911 film L'Inferno, which I should be doing a video on as well. I have blog posts. Actually, there were two films called L'Inferno made in 1911. One is about 15 minutes long, and the other is about an hour long, and I should like to be doing video forms of those, the blog posts I did on both of those films. Alchemists are in the 10th Bolgia, tormented by scaly, itchy, foul-smelling scabs they keep pulling off of themselves. In the Middle Ages, base metals were seen as diseases of gold, and lead as the leprosy of gold. And the medieval understanding of leprosy, the conception of that disease, wasn't really like the most accurate, like medical, like and scientific conception we have of it today. But that was, what people in the Middle Ages considered to be leprosy, because that was just, the basis of their like scientific understanding with the knowledge they had access to at the time. Also in this Bolgia are falsifiers, impersonators, and counterfeiters who suffer from rabies and a form of dropsy which causes intense thirst. The 9th circle is for betrayers. Ring 1, Caina, or Cana, punishes betrayers of kin. Ring 2, Antenora, publishes treason. Ring 3, Ptolemaea, punishes betrayers of guests. And Ring 4, Judica, punishes betrayers of masters and benefactors. Judica, named for Judas, is eerily silent, as all the souls are trapped in ice. The ice represents the coldness of grief, and the sinner's downturned faces symbolized shame. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you found this post informative. If you're like studying the poem, or you just love Dante and just like hearing any other information you can get, or if you already know, you just like hearing like different points of view about this. If you like this kind of content, please consider liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting. I'm really hoping to build my channel more throughout this coming year, so I will like have a greater group of friends on BookTube and AuthorTube. If I get to 100 subscribers, I'll be doing a 105 planned video series on Giovanni Boccaccio's Decameron. My next post will be on Wednesday. I'm not sure what the topic will be yet, but my post for next week actually not Monday, it'll be on Tuesday, because if it's March 8th, was on like International Women's Day. I'll be talking about one of my sheroes, my 29 great-grandmother, Queen St. Margaret of Scotland, whom if I'm blessed with children before time runs out, and if I have a girl, I will name my daughter Margalit, which is the Hebrew form of Margaret, after this wonderful, amazing woman whom I just admire so much, and I'm so proud to be a descendant of her. And so thank you guys again very much for watching and supporting my channel, and see you again very soon. Thanks.